Good afternoon. I'm Blaine Day. I keep bees in the high desert of southern Utah in the United States. I've had my experiences with the wax moth, and I'm here to share what I've learned from sad experience and research. We have two varieties of wax moth. The lesser wax moth is found in the warmer climate of the southern states. The greater wax moth is found across the United States. This is the critter I have experience with, but prevention applies to both varieties. The wax moth goes through complete metamorphosis just like her honeybee. Egg development varies with temperature. At 75 to 80 degrees Fahrenheit, the eggs hatch in 5 to 8 days. At 50 to 60 degrees Fahrenheit, eggs may take up to 35 days to hatch. Egg masses of 300 to 600 eggs are found on the comb, edges of the frame, and in cracks and gaps in the hive. Because the adult moth avoids the light, she prefers portions of the hive farthest from the light. Once the moth egg hatches, the larva burrows into the wax almost immediately after hatching. The larvae burrow through the midrib of the comb and bases of the cells. The larvae feed mainly on impurities in the wax, such as residue from larval skins and bee cocoons. Larvae seem to avoid pollen, but they can eat it and develop on it. The cappings of the cells sealed brood, containing sealed brood, are sometimes destroyed. I've never seen wax moth damage to foundation, only to drawn comb. Even then, they seem to want comb that has been used for bird rearing. The larvae move considerable distance around the comb and the hive. As they travel around the nest, they leave trails of silk and black frass or feces, as shown in the center photo. As with the eggs, the length of the larval period from hatching of the egg to pupation varies by temperature and ranges from 28 days to 4 or 5 months. Larvae develop best at normal hive temperature, 85 to 95 degrees. Development is slower at lower temperatures. At 40 to 45 degrees Fahrenheit, the larvae seem to become dormant. The pupal stage within the cocoon lasts 8 to 62 days, again depending on temperature. When it's time to pupate, the larvae chew channels in the wood, as seen in the background of each of my slides. They spin their dense, tough, silken cocoons in these troughs. The cocoons look and feel like they're made of paper. They're glued to the wood, but scrape off quite easily. 4 to 10 days after emerging from her cocoon, the adult female begins to deposit eggs. She continues to do so as long as she is able. According to one report, a single female deposited 102 eggs in 1 minute. A female moth that emerges from a dead or weakened colony can carry honeybee pathogens from that nest to another hive as she searches for a different place to reproduce. I often hear beekeepers complain that wax moth killed their bees, but a reasonably strong colony will keep the moth well under control. Strong colonies don't have moth problems. Only after a colony is weak or dead do the moths move in. It's important for every beekeeper to check colonies regularly to ensure they're strong and healthy. Also, if a beekeeper adds supers too early, even to a strong colony, the hive will have more space than the colony can defend. Wax moth will exploit the undefended space in the hive that has too much space. It's a good idea for the beekeeper to help the colony keep the nest clean. I like to clean the bottom board of every spring. This helps to eliminate hiding places for moth eggs and young larvae. A strong colony will keep the bottom board clean throughout the season, but I help when needed. Damaged and cracked boxes, frames, and combs provide nice hiding places for the female adult to lay her eggs. So keep equipment in good shape. Supers full of frames should be prepared for storage soon after the harvest. If they're just sitting around the honey house, shed, or garage for a few weeks, they are an open invitation to moth infestation. Protect those combs right away. As with everything else in agriculture, we need to embrace integrated pest management. Too many beekeepers and gardeners think that IPM means rejecting modern methods of pest control. As master beekeepers, we need to promote and exemplify the willingness to Consider all approved methods of ensuring success in the beekeeping craft. I think it's prudent to begin pest control with the least harmful technique or product available, but we must use tools that are effective and approved. Regarding the wax moth menace, we have chemical, cultural, and biological tools available to us. I will cover some options in each of these three categories. Harvest time is a great time to clean up and maintain your frames and boxes. Scrape off all that old burr comb and propolis, both from the frames and the boxes. Then stack them neatly. Tape up the cracks and seams and use one of the storage methods I'll describe in this section. An exception to tightly stacking supers is using light to control wax moth, which I will cover. Mice can also be a problem in stored equipment, but they're beyond the scope of this presentation. I'll start with chemical control of the wax moth. The various beekeeping supply vendors sell paradichlorobenzene for this purpose. The brand name is Paramoth. Paramoth is my least favorite method of controlling the wax moth. I've done it, it works, but I don't like it. Paramoth leaves residue in wax and honey. When I've used Paramoth in the past, I stack the boxes about 5 to 6 feet high and put a paper plate with the crystals on the top bars of the top box. Then I close the top of the stack. It's necessary to check stored equipment every month or so because the crystals sublimate and need to be replaced. In high concentrations, paradichlorobenzene is toxic to bees, so when it's time to put the supers and frames back on the hive, stand the box full of frames on one end outdoors to air out for a few days. The mothballs and crystals used for storing clothing are a different chemical and must never be used. Burning sulfur strips or spraying of sulfur dioxide from a pressurized vessel are the two main control methods using sulfur. There's a commercial beekeeping operation here in Utah that uses this method of control. This is one of the most effective tools against wax moth. It's highly volatile but not fat soluble and therefore poses only a slight danger to bees, wax, and honey. Because of its volatility, it leaves no harmful residues in the comb, but because of its volatility, it needs repeated applications, just like Paramoth. After removing comb from the colonies, it is recommended to wait a week or two before treatment because the treatment is ineffective against eggs, so we need wax moth larvae to be present. For best results, the treatment can be repeated after 2 weeks. Don't breathe this stuff. Acetic acid is found in vinegar. Formic acid is already used as a mite control. The vapor in these acids instantly kills eggs and adult moths, but the larvae and pupae are more resistant to the vapor, so more is required. Because the larvae and pupae are resistant, it's best to treat the combs immediately after removal from the colonies, before eggs can develop into larvae. These acids can control metal parts and tools, so don't breathe this stuff. Now talk about a couple of cultural wax moth controls. Moths don't like the light and fresh air, so boxes full of frames can be stood on end so that air and light can enter the boxes every day. Some beekeepers build racks hanging from the ceiling to hold unused frames and keep them exposed to light and ventilation. I haven't tried this, but some beekeepers like it. Freezing temperatures kill the wax moth eggs and larvae. A beekeeper can put frames to be stored in a plastic bag, seal it up, then put the bag in a freezer for 2 or 3 days. The frames can then be removed from the freezer and stored at room or garage temperature as long as the bag is unopened. When it's time to use the frames, just pull them out of the bag and put them on the hive. If you keep bees with cold winters, you might be able to skip the freezer. Supers full of frames can also be stored outside or in a shed in the winter if temperatures are below freezing. Experience tells me that your garage isn't likely to be cold enough to kill the moth eggs and larvae, so put your frames in a freezer for a couple of days before storage in a garage. Now talk about the biological control of the wax moth. Over the past several years, this has become my favorite, most reliable way of protecting my combs from wax moth damage. Bacillus thuringiensis is a bacterium which is harmless to humans and to our bees. It's used in organic gardening and organic farming to control certain pests in the moth family. The brand name Sertan has been tested and approved to control the wax moth. Sertan is available from most beekeeping supply vendors. Check the restrictions in your jurisdiction to ensure Sertan is legal for you to use. There are other brands of this product, but we need to support the brand that has done the work to get approval and to prove effectiveness and safety. After harvest, I put my supers back on the hive above the inner cover for the colony to clean out the remaining honey residue. Then I mix the Sertan with water and spray it on both sides of each frame. I put the frames back into the supers and stand the supers on end for the breeze to flow through to dry the frames. They're then ready to store. If there are wax moth eggs in my stored equipment, they hatch, the larvae start eating my combs, they get sick and die. It's a wonderful thing. The literature indicates that a treatment is good for 2 to 3 months, but I find that a single treatment works for me at least well into the following summer on stored combs. I haven't seen a single wax moth adult or larva in my equipment for about 10 years, thanks to Sertan. I recommend it to all. If wax moth damage is minimal, the bees can clean and repair the combs. If the damage is more serious, the bees need help, often with new frames. Although the wax moth destroys the comb, wooden frames in good condition can be reused after wax moth has damaged the combs. I've scraped the wood and soaked the wooden frames in a sanitizing solution. New wax foundation or plastic foundation can then easily be placed into the cleaned frames. Or you can let the bees build their own natural comb. I've also refurbished damaged plastic foundation and plastic frames, but I've found that saving plastic foundation, plastic frames isn't worth my time. As for wax moth damage to the boxes, just scrape them clean and they're good to go. The divots left by the cocoons add a nice character to the frames. Use those cocoon depressions to remind you to do a better job of preventing wax moth infestation. Wax moth damage is annoying and can be expensive, but I'll take wax moth damage over some of the other problems our bees have, such as disease, parasites, and lack of forage. With some understanding, attention, and simple care, we can avoid or minimize wax moth problems. We should never blame the wax moth or anything else for our failure as beekeepers. But if we do have wax moths in our hives, take them fishing. These are some of the resources I used to prepare this presentation. If any of my classmates want a copy of my slides, send me an email. I welcome any questions.